So let's just dive right into this. You've probably looked at the leaders of today's biggest, most disruptive companies and wondered, how do their minds actually work? Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating paradox in modern corporate leadership. We're looking at those specific figures who literally reshape entire industries overnight. But the question we have to ask, and honestly, what the data is forcing us to ask, is this. Are these leaders visionary geniuses, or are they dangerous narcissists? It's a really fine line, and today we're going to explore exactly how this psychological profile fundamentally alters the way modern companies communicate, take risks, and ultimately make decisions. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The visionary CEO paradox. 2. Defining corporate narcissism. 3. Internal culture and communication. 4. External strategy and risks. And 5. Evaluating the trade-offs. All right, starting with part 1, the visionary CEO paradox. So why exactly do we revere the whole celebrity CEO thing? Well, researcher Christopher Lasch hit on something huge when he noted, for the narcissist, the world is a mirror. Basically, these highly visible leaders depend on us, the public, shareholders, the media, to reflect back their own grandiose self-image. When a CEO gets that celebrity status, suddenly their crazy daring ventures and disruptive behaviors are viewed as virtues. We literally feed the mirror, validating actions that, in any other normal context, would be massive red flags. Moving into part 2, defining corporate narcissism. Okay, to really ground our analysis here, we need to look way past public perception. On the surface, we see hyper self-confidence, swagger, absolute fearlessness, right? But clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula points out this incredible contradiction. In clinical terms, narcissism actually implies pathological insecurity. What looks like this unshakable crown is very often just a fragile defensive mask. And it's exactly this hidden, deep-seated vulnerability that makes their decision-making and leadership style so wild and unpredictable. If we actually look at the APA's DSM-5, the clinical criteria for narcissism include grandiosity, attention-seeking, and this really unrealistic inflated self-view that basically requires constant reinforcement. Now imagine taking a personality with those specific traits and dropping them into the absolute highest seat of corporate power. The ripple effects on how that company communicates and functions, they're absolutely massive. Which brings us to part 3, internal culture and communication. So, how do these traits actually rewrite a company's internal mechanics? Academic studies usually point straight to top management teams, or TMTs. In a normal setup, this is an independent, problem-solving group. But under a narcissistic CEO, these loyal executives basically just become a direct extension of the leader. It's a buffer of yes people. They deliberately remove independent pushback, which ensures the CEO's vision is executed without question. But it completely sacrifices any genuine critical evaluation of their decisions. And this severely impacts how people actually talk to each other inside the firm. Clinical expert Wendy Beharry notes, conversation with a narcissist is hardly an exchange of ideas. It's a one-way delivery, a monologue. In a corporate setting, this means internal dialogue just completely breaks down. Information gets passed down on a strict need-to-know basis. True collaboration is basically stifled because two-way communication is eliminated. The leader dictates and the whole company just reacts. And you can see this clearly when researchers objectively categorize these impacts, like in the Kragan study. A really distinct divide emerges here. There's this massive split between the internal outcomes that totally disrupt the inside of the firm and the external outcomes that dictate the company's big public successes. Internally, this leadership style just crushes normal workforce structures. It shuts down feedback loops, which leads directly to employee silence and crazy high turnover, burning out incredibly talented innovators. But externally, this exact same personality is driving massive mergers and acquisitions, high-stakes brand maneuvering, and wildly fluctuating financial performance. Actually, scratch that. They aren't just driving it, they're chasing it. They bypass stable, incremental growth just to score those big, dramatic wins for public validation. All right, part 4, external strategy and risks. So how do these traits translate into those volatile market strategies we're always reading about in the headlines? Well, one specific bold tactic is collapsing the chain of command. For highly technical CEOs, there's a huge tendency to bypass middle management entirely and go speak directly with individual contributors, or ICs, like your ground-level engineers. It's a total double-edged sword. It lets the CEO make incredibly bold, rapid technical bets without their vision getting watered down. But it also triggers absolute organizational chaos because it bypasses all those crucial feasibility checks. The sheer calculation behind these massive risks is fascinating. Consider this metric: less than 10%. To put that into perspective, that's an objective breakdown of SpaceX's economics. That's the recovery and refurbishment cost of a Falcon 9 booster compared to just building a brand new one. A traditional, non-narcissistic leader, they'd probably look at that and say, landing a rocket is way too volatile, way too costly. But a visionary, risk-seeking CEO pushes through incredible engineering failures and massive financial burn to hit that sub-10% cost, completely disrupting a totally stagnant aerospace industry. But, there is absolutely a darker side to this kind of unilateral control. Experts actually call it the autocratic playbook. We can see this objectively in recent high-profile acquisitions, like the transition from Twitter to X. First, you see massive, abrupt workforce layoffs. Then, the immediate removal of any dissenting C-suite leadership. And finally, total rebranding and the wiping out of iconic legacy assets. It is rapid, autocratic change driven entirely by one single leader's mandate, with absolutely zero consensus building. And that leads us to our final section, Part 5, evaluating the trade-offs. Look, the upside of this leadership style is undeniably huge. We're talking aggressive innovation, the totally fearless disruption of stagnant legacy industries, and incredibly rapid technological iteration. These leaders literally force the future into the present. But the downside is heavy: toxic work environments, drastically high employee burnout, silenced internal communication, and extreme financial volatility. The data clearly shows us that these firms don't necessarily perform better financially in the long run. They just experience wildly higher highs and catastrophically lower lows. Which leaves us with a really difficult question to chew on. Are the extreme financial and cultural risks actually worth the aggressive innovation? We rely so much on these visionary, albeit narcissistic leaders to push the boundaries of technology and human capability. But as we've seen, that progress comes with an incredibly high human and organizational cost. So is this a necessary trade-off for progress, or is it a fundamentally toxic model we need to rethink? Keep that in mind the next time a celebrity CEO makes headlines. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. I really hope this gave you a powerful new framework for understanding the leaders who are shaping our world today.